Hi, I'm Dino Tripodis. Tonight on Whiskey Business, the topic of suicide is always a tough and rough one. But if you've ever wondered about the reasons as to why, as to how, and when, and think that maybe that information might help in preventing future incidents, well, you're going to want to listen to tonight's podcast with suicide investigator and post-vention specialist Dallas Allen, tonight on Whiskey Business. Hi, I'm Dino Tripodis, and welcome to the very first podcast of 2025, Whiskey Business, the podcast not so much about whiskey as it still is one with whiskey.
Yes.
I think technically we're over the Happy New Year greetings. I always, say that once you get past, I think, the fourth or fifth.
Once you've seen somebody at least twice, then you're out of things to greet them with.
You can't. And it's so funny because I believed that for years, and then apparently Larry David had the same thought process because there was an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where remember I came in talking about it, like, oh, I can't believe they did this on Larry David. Where he said, like, I don't think so. It's too late. It's gone. It's like, you get past a certain day and and there's no Happy New Year's. But
where's my Happy New Year, Larry? Where's my Happy New Year?
Where's my Happy New Year? But we are doing a little bit of out with the old and in with the new. As I continue to make room for future bottles, I realized I went back to the archives and saw that we never drank any of this Booker's that I've had, and it's been around for a while. It's 120. What did I say? 26, 29?
129.
129.
Oh my!
Proof book. It's hot. It's hot, and that's why I poured it before we even started the podcast to let the ice do its job.
And isn't it the thing? Like each batch is different. Like so that's even if we had Booker's, maybe we definitely didn't have this bottle.
We didn't have this bottle, no.
Right.
So who cares?
And our guest Dallas Allen is not a big whiskey drinker, but he said he would sip socially.
Attaboy.
This is a tough one to be sipping socially. So
Welcome
let his
hit him with this one, man.
Let his continue to melt.
That's pretty good.
A little bit.
It's good.
It's not bad. It's not that harsh.
You don't think it's that hot?
Well, it has been sitting in ice for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when I first poured it, I went, "Whoo!"
Tastes like burning.
That's going to go in the back for a minute. So did everybody have a good holiday, good Christmas, and a good New Year's?
Yeah, laid back.
Laid back. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
I asked only for the sake of the podcast because we all stayed in contact with each other.
Yeah.
And tossed back.
We didn't have a Christmas show this year.
No, we did not.
But the snow we just had was reminiscent of the snow I imagined at our Christmas party. Whenever I come in, God, it's cold out there. It's snow. Remember? That was the because it surrounded and comforted everyone. This big huge blanket of snow or smothered.
Also want to thank Greg Hansberry for a belated Christmas present. I got the Everybody's Ash receiver, universally used, and what it is, it's an ash tray but there's a little toilet on it. See,
ash receiver, I guess.
Yeah, and
very clever.
An ashtray.
Yeah. You don't think I'm going to use this?
No, I know you're going to. I knew you were going to use. That's why I got it. I know you're going to use it.
Is that plastic? Can it burn? Can you burn it?
The ashes should be okay. I wouldn't put a cigarette out in it.
Okay.
But maybe did they think about that, or they're? You know what?
How old is? I mean, this is
from 1949.
Yeah, they didn't care about
that.
You know what? I might not use it. I might sell it.
The war. Well, I'll tell you what I paid for it. So if you got a good deal or not.
No,
get anything on
Joe,
eBay.
did you get?
I didn't.
They got.
Go for it. Do it, man.
Do it.
I gave Dino and Chip something.
I got something from Whitney here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I hate opening presents in front of everybody. Thank
You're
you.
gonna do it.
We're putting a little joy in front of the podcast. Not that tonight's podcast is going to be sad, but
Just buckle up.
It deals with a somber, a rather somber topic, but I think what Dallas
There's
Allen does
something
is
else
pretty
besides that.
amazing. So we'll get to that in just a second.
All right, I see.
So a little
That's
bit
just
of
a gag.
Why we drink? You know what is funny? I just saw the one Dino. It's a picture of like,
Everybody got one.
everybody got
Of a
one.
dad with,
Everybody
like,
got
kids.
one. It's kind of like your
I got
Buffalo
one.
Trace for everybody.
And there's
Every-
something else though. The real
I
president's
saw
right
it hang right here by Dino. I was like, oh, that's funny.
The real,
All right,
real.
now there's something else.
Yeah, something else.
there. Yeah.
All right, okay, here.
He was very concerned that it was sitting out on the front porch underneath the.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool.
There's two of them. There should be two of them.
I didn't.
Dino got the second one.
No, I did
there's
not.
two.
All right.
One's
Cool.
So
red.
I didn't
it's
touch 'em.
for the listeners. It's a painting of
Why don't you show the camera?
of Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
With the text of Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over the
Is
text
that
of
what
Mary
it was?
Shelley.
Or is
it's
it
a
dictionary?
That's
It's
dictionary.
a dictionary that says what.
And then there's a Bride of Frankenstein. This is great. Thanks,
That is
thanks, John.
cool.
This is cool.
That is cool.
I like the reuse of the
Yeah,
dictionary.
that's the
of words.
artist
That's
form. I
cool.
know that
Right.
artist.
Yeah.
You do know
I
her?
know who you're talking. Who did that?
Yeah, yeah.
My wife has one.
That's
of,
very cool. Very cool.
I got one with The Shining with Jack Nicholson and
Taz Decort. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, my wife got
Which
those too.
movie do you like better, Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein?
I don't know. I gotta be honest. I don't know if I've ever seen Bride of Frankenstein all the way through.
oh wow.
It's the better movie.
Just seen
Is it
scenes.
better?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It all blends together.
I don't. It's of the two. I'd have to say.
Yeah.
You know, the.
There's only two. Pick
That's
pick
right.
one. Pick one. It's only we only have an hour.
You know,
This is like.
I like the one with Gene Hackman. I think that was actually the best.
Young
Yeah.
Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein. That's the word I was looking
the
for.
one.
I like the young Frankenstein.
Also,
version
this
better.
is Frankenstein is on the B page where Bible Christian is right up there.
Nice. There you go.
See?
Is that what you took? Is that what you're taking away from it? Oh, very
So
nice.
it
Well, I bet
cancels
the
out
artist
middle
had to
part.
have thought of that. Whoa.
All right, and the Dino got everybody.
You got everybody the same thing, one, but everybody's
Yeah.
additional.
Yeah, we got
you
that.
see the nice wrapping. OHLQ has they offer up the best holiday wrapping.
That's right.
The brown
It's
paper
pretty
bag.
Good.
Oh,
Nice.
Sex, drugs, music, meditation. What next?
What next?
The
The
Beatles.
Beatles. That's a
Nice.
that's a
That's funny.
vintage book.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a vintage.
They got sci-fi.
Zapping the uptight.
They got. I think Chip got
Yeah.
Russian
Yeah.
sci-fi.
Yes.
Great,
and
thanks.
Whitney got a compilation
Yeah.
of sci-fi
Yeah.
since they do
Technology.
the Star Trek
do.
podcast, which you might as well
thank
give a
you.
plug.
Yeah, Star Trek
EJ? Is that
podcast.
so
It's
fancy?
Brandy.
Eat Killer's at your favorite bar and grill.
for your
Only
coffee.
available on YouTube.
Available on YouTube.
I feel like
your hot
really
chocolate.
sophisticated. I've got
Or if you have
brandy,
a brandy
and a book.
a brandy snifter, just whatever. Yeah, everybody got
you know.
brandy to a little
great.
accoutrement. It's gotta keep.
Yeah,
away
brandy's
from the
different and fun.
So
You know.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Dino. Thank
you're
you,
welcome.
John.
You're
Thank
welcome.
Chip.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The best to all of us in 2025. It's
Yeah.
gonna be that kind of year.
It's going to be different.
It's gonna,
Yeah.
it's gonna be
Remember
different.
in 2000, in 2019 we said 2020 was going to be our year. Do you remember that?
Nope.
Oh man, I
don't
remember it.
and I don't recall.
Oh,
'cause
yeah.
All I remember that.
Well, that was a year, all right.
Yeah,
Every
it was-
year's our year.
That was a pandemic year, wasn't it? Yeah, not good, not good.
One of these years you're going to be right.
it's gonna be odds are in our favor. It's got to happen sooner or later. But no, man, I appreciate you guys sticking it out with me
Yeah.
for what seems to be another year. And Chip, if you would so
I was gonna get
graciously
up and get Dallas
grab
in here.
your remote microphone over there.
Well, that's happening.
And
Can you
welcome-
do the. He's got to do the.
Well, while Dallas is sitting down, Hansberry can do the business. Dallas Allen joins us on the podcast here. I'm very excited about. I'll tell you how Dallas and I met and why he's here tonight to kick off a rather somber first podcast of the year, but a good one nonetheless. Yeah, very important. Go ahead, Hansberry.
Whiskey Business is the podcast not so much about whiskey as it is one with whiskey, whiskeybusinesspod.com. You can find us on YouTube. You know, Johnny does a great job with all the videos.
Does an amazing job.
Whiskey Business with Dino Tripodis. That's where you'll find it. Smash that subscribe button and click that little ding, ding, ding. This is a little podcast inside talk. Do you know that YouTube is now the most used app for podcasting?
Yep.
Isn't that nuts?
And you know what's nuts about it
How's
is that we were putting our podcast on YouTube before that became a
Before
thing.
it was cool to do.
Yep. And we're still getting just as many views as we did.
Right. I wish it was a thing now. 30 views, baby.
Let's go. We are
Just
on
one
here-
of us, and it ain't going to be me, needs to investigate that little thing called an algorithm
algorithm.
and figure it out.
We're also on Spotify, Instagram, or Apple, all your favorite podcasts.
Wherever you get a podcast, you can get us.
We are on Instagram, Facebook. Thank you for following us, and thank you to Evergreen, the Evergreen Podcast Network, our parent company.
There you go.
Yep.
Cheers.
Cheers. And welcome, Dallas Allen.
Dallas.
Everybody. A young man, in my opinion, who I think has a very serious, seems to be, and might be better suited for somebody wiser in their years capacity, but I'm starting to think that really doesn't matter as long as the soul and the heart is intact in what you do. Dallas is a suicide investigator and a post-intervention specialist. And when we first met, we met at a benefit for Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation. We sat at the same table and started talking. And I found what you do to be fascinating. And I said, would you consider being on the podcast? And you said you would. And it's taken me this long for us to get to you. But nonetheless, you're still here. Tell me how this position came about. Who is this position through in respects to our city government and how we function?
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually an extremely unique position. So when I actually came aboard in 2021, it did not exist within a medical legal office, which is a coroner's office or medical examiner's office.
So when you came in 2021, what was your job?
So when I came in prior to that, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So prior to that, I was in the space of at-risk youth. So I worked a lot with youth who find themselves involved with the criminal justice system. And then my job was to connect them with services, get them in vocational programs to further divert them from involvement with that criminal justice system. But I always kind of in the back of my mind enjoyed investigations, putting the pieces together in a puzzle.
Sounds like somebody I know.
That's why we hit it off so well
Immediately, right?
At the dinner, yeah.
So I always had that in the back of my mind. And so when I was at the Franklin County Juvenile Court at the time, and then we were going through some changes at the court. So I just started to kind of branch out and look around what is available. So I actually applied for the coroner's office for a forensic investigator position, just in general. So that would be investigating any death that is of unnatural causes.
Correct.
And so I actually interviewed there 4 times, but not having specific education and experience in forensic death investigation, I kind of kept getting beat out. But at that time, when I was going through the interview process, Dr. Ortiz, which was the coroner at the time, she said, "Hey, I'm in kind of talks about this unique position that doesn't exist yet. We don't have the funding for it. It really is just kind of a conversation at this point." At that time, she was actually having a conversation with Tony Coder, who's actually was a guest on here when you guys talked about man therapy. And so they were saying, "Hey, we're seeing a rise in the suicide deaths in our community, and what can we do about it?" So actually, a conversation between Tony and Dr. Ortiz came to the point where OSPF said, "Hey, I will go ahead and provide the grant, so the money to the coroner's office, where you can house someone who's doing a 2-part. So it's a hybrid between a forensic investigator and then that suicide specialist. So that's kind of where it came about, is just really a conversation. And so when I was actually at the coroner's office for my 4th interview, I sat down and they didn't really have any questions for me because I'd already
answered
every interview question.
Seen you 4 times before.
I sat down. We were all friends at that point.
Still went to Ohio State, huh?
Yeah.
Let me just say right out of the gate, you're not getting that other job. But this one.
Yeah, that's really kind of what happened. So I sat down, and Dr. Ortiz at the time, she was like, "Hey, we're going to go through this. We're going to do this interview." But she's like, "I want to talk to you about this position, to see if you would, be interested in it." So at that point, I knew I wasn't getting the forensic investigator position. But she kind of laid it out for me, and just with my kind of experience, not only professionally but personally, it just really felt right. And so I said, "Yeah, if you get the money for that, I am in." And so fast forward 6 months from that day, my partner at my previous job, she was like, "Hey, did you see the news article?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't see it yet." So I pulled up the news, and there was actually an article saying that the coroner's office got the funding for a suicide specialist position, a first of its kind. And then literally by the time I was done reading that article, I got a personal phone call from Dr. Ortiz. And she said, I don't know if you saw the post yet, but we got the money, and I just want to know if you're ready to do it. Cool. And I said, let's do it.
So you, in essence, a creative position, you're setting the bar. I mean, anybody that comes into this position after you is looking at Dallas Allen to see what he's accomplished, what he's done, and if they choose to improve upon it, you're it. I mean, you're the measure right now. And you said that you said that you came to this job with your professionally background, but also personally. You mentioned. Tell me how the personal aspect of this applies to what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah. So when you think of the world of suicide, you have a lot of things that go into that. Suicide itself is very multifaceted. It's not just one thing that's going on, and a lot of times it is mental illness, people struggling with mental illness. And as many others, I've had my own personal experiences with mental health, more specifically depression and anxiety. And so, I took a lot of my younger years to figure that out, what that means for me and what that looks like for me. And I was able to kind of meet my struggles and understand that, and then be able to cope with them, and then kind of lead a successful life from that. But I know a lot of people don't necessarily get to that point. They struggle with mental illness so much that they don't necessarily know where to go. And so I took that with me into the youth space, where you have a lot of young people who are just kind of figuring out that they might be struggling mentally. They find themselves getting in trouble and in the criminal justice system. And a lot of times we found that, a lot of mental illness was kind of the underlying factor in that, and kind of what led them to this path. And so I've kind of taken my own personal experiences with me. And then I also spent time at a residential facility working with adolescent females. And so these were young women who experienced a lot of trauma in their past, rather that be physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And so in that, I got close with someone, and I really spent a lot of time in trying to equip her with life skills, so that when we were to discharge them, because once at our facility, once they turned 18, we had to discharge them, as we were only 12 to 17. And so I spent years trying to get her ready to go out into the world and live a successful life. But ultimately, when we had discharged her, and a couple months after that, she died by suicide. And so that was something that impacted me pretty hard. And again, it came back to, she just wasn't necessarily equipped how to deal with how depression and how her mental illness was affecting her personally, as it does affect everyone differently.
I mentioned at the start of the podcast that I called you a young man. I won't say how old you are. It really doesn't matter. But it's interesting that you were able to identify the root causes of your depression at a younger age. I mean, it seems like when you were growing up, that at least we were addressing the topic of depression a bit more aggressively at the time when you had the opportunity to figure things out, as opposed to myself in the 90s, who it was just like, I think I'm depressed, and I had to take measures on my own to figure things out. And we'll talk a little bit more about the minutia of the job, what's involved in it. But are you still doing maintenance for yourself?
Yeah.
On a regular basis? Is that necessary, or is the job in itself kind of maintenance in a way?
I would say both to that. So self-care is extremely important. I think not only just with my specialized position, but that would expand to everyone who's doing death investigation, first responders, nurses, anyone who is being exposed to pretty traumatic incidences on a daily basis. It's important to take your self-care in your own hands and make sure that you know what works for you and how you can feel better when you leave for the day. Now, so that's what I do on the outside, but also the job itself really does help me. And I know that's a weird way to say that, but again, from my own personal experiences, and now I'm going to the scene and I'm meeting with people on the immediate aftermath of the worst day of their life.
Right.
And so being able to be there, have them look at me, instill some trust in me, and help answer some questions when it comes to how your grief is kind of navigated when it comes to suicide.
And they probably hope that you're going to help people too. I would think where that trust comes.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I make sure with the families that I'm dealing with, I immediately tell them that they now unfortunately find themselves on a path that is extremely difficult, extremely unique, but they're not alone. There's a lot of people who've been affected by suicide in our society, and it's important to not suppress those feelings.
Right.
Understand that it's going to take some time to navigate those, and I think being there, I can answer those questions for them. Maybe that someone who didn't necessarily experience something like that could be able to answer. But the big why question when it comes to suicide, right? That's something that immediately happens.
Right.
Why did this happen?
Why did it
what could
happen?
I have done to prevent this myself? And then that itself is just a lot of weight on someone's shoulders who's already experiencing a traumatic day. So if I can be there to help them and assist them in that, that makes me feel really good. And when I get feedback from families and they say, hey, you literally met me on my worst day, but you just were kind of a ray of sunshine in that moment. You made me feel comfortable. You made me feel not alone. And I've continued to kind of build those relationships with them and continue to have those conversations. That in itself, when I go home, that makes me feel really good.
So walk us through that worst day. So you're in the office, you get a call, or the coroner's office gets a call, and there's somebody has committed suicide. Where do you go? What do you do exactly? Or you're only dealing with the family members or the people, the loved ones, or are you actually part of going to the scene and looking and seeing what happens so you have answers for people?
Yeah.
later?
So I'm actually involved from start to finish. So when we receive a call from a first responder, usually if it's a scene, it'll be a police officer will give us a call, and we'll go through what we call as a death call. So we'll actually just get the basic circumstances of what's going on. We'll get the name of the decedent, any family that may be unseen, the circumstances, what happened, what are we going into, what's coming up. At that point, I plug that into the system, and then I'm on my way to that scene with a forensic investigator. So we work in pairs. So I'll go with them. I help them and assist them in the forensic investigation to a degree that they kind of dictate what works best for them. So they're the lead investigator. I'm the assistant on the scene response. And so I will go ahead and go into the residence, say it happened in a residence. I'll go to the immediate scene. I'll help them with that forensic investigation. So collecting evidence to determine what happened here, what is the cause of the situation, and then after I've kind of helped them through that process, at that point I'll kind of break off, and that's when I engage with the family, make sure that they're doing okay, and go through that process.
So that's really mind-boggling because you're coming to a scene. You have to. You're more than one person. You're an investigator. You're a counselor. You're a therapist. You're a shoulder to cry on. I mean, and
An official,
yeah, in an official capacity as well. I mean, that just boggles my mind that you have to be all these different things. And again, we're not talking about a job that, okay, you've got 6 weeks of training to do what you do. The training was on the job, literally.
Yeah.
When you first went into it. So what was that very first case like?
To be honest, I was really scared.
I bet.
Really nervous. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. But as I kind of started to get in there and navigate it and then learn more about the space of mental health and suicide, I realized that it's actually really hard to say the wrong thing. If you just say something, they can then feel that there are people there that are there for them. And so I started to feel more comfortable in that space because I didn't necessarily, strategically, I got to say this, I got to say this. It was me more coming to them and then really letting them lead my part in that psychosocial, letting them, confide in me and tell me kind of how they're feeling in that moment and what they feel had happened in this moment as well.
Sometimes people just need somebody to listen to their venting or whatever you want, however you want to say it.
And so at first I felt that I needed to be very structured and we got to go through these questions, and I didn't feel that I got necessarily a lot of the answers that I was searching for on the scene. But then once I came there in more of a peer capacity, let them know that although I don't understand the specific situation they find themselves in today, I do understand it for my own personal experiences. And so they can ask me questions that they might not be able to ask someone randomly who doesn't necessarily understand that or feel confident or comfortable in having that conversation. And then once I did that and kind of let them lead that, I got a lot more positive results, I felt that people opened up more and were confident in the work that I was going to do with them providing me that information, that I wasn't going to hurt them with that information. That's very intimate information.
So you arrive on the scene, and when you leave the scene, you're not done. There's follow-up. There's follow-up with the families. There's follow-up and so forth and so on. And that could range from one day to how many days, or and I would imagine this would be a hell of a load. I mean, how long do you stay in touch with these families? As long as it takes, or is there? I mean, how do you remove yourself from a situation because you have to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
And how does that weight not continue to accumulate?
Right. I would always be like, oh, I should go back and tell that guy that one thing. You know?
How do you manage that?
Again, letting the loss survivor lead the process has made it extremely easier. And that means my time involved with them is up to them. And so a lot of times there's people whose grief is a little bit quicker. They kind of, experience this, and then they're kind of, tough skinned, and they're like, we need to move forward, not move on, but move forward. And they don't necessarily reach out to me as much. But I do let the families know that I am there for them. They have my number, they have my email, they can reach out to me at any point. A lot of my work is helping them navigate just the next steps that comes from a death of a family. So that means, funerals, stuff like that. A lot of people, that's not easy to do. It's a big task.
Right. Where would you even start? Like, it's something.
Yeah.
Are you the only one doing this right now? Or have they added to the staff? Is there more of you on staff as we speak?
So not in our staff. So I'm the only one. We do actually have a specialist that does it for accidental overdose, though. So they do exactly what I do, but for in the space of substance abuse.
Accidental, not
accidental
suicide.
overdose.
So are you on call 24/7?
I'm not on call 24/7. So that is the uniqueness that I am. When I'm on scene, I'm actually just an assistant for that scene response. So our forensic investigators, they are staffed 24/7. And so they will go to a scene, say it comes in at midnight, I'm not there, I work 8 to 4. So if I'm not there, they'll go to that scene response. I don't affect their scene response, I don't change it in any way. So they would go complete their investigation the same way, and then I would obtain all of the information for the family, and then I will follow up that next day.
So if it happens between 8 and 4, you're there with them, and if it's after 4 o'clock, I mean that's good. It establishes some sort of normalcy, but you also strike me as a very, if I'm in, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Where like 8 to 4, where like I wonder what's going on between 5 and midnight, and from midnight till I go to work in the next morning. I mean, do you wake up and go, I wonder what's waiting for me?
Of course. And I also get notified. So my name is locked into our system. So anytime that a suspected suicide comes in, I will be notified of that. So I will know what I'm coming into. And I mean, and it's honestly hard. I wish I could work 24/7. I'm going to be honest with you. Because, again, connecting with the families is my utmost priority. So if I could do it all the time, I really, really would.
Well, do you find yourself doing a better job when you do assist? Or doesn't make a difference?
I don't think it necessarily makes that big of a difference. Now, I do like being able to be on the scene because a lot of times families will have questions related to the circumstances.
There's a certain amount of immediacy that that can't be replicated and replaced.
And so I can help them with a very soft approach when it comes to the circumstances. Because again, when you're a family member and you get a call or you find your loved one, the questions start overloading your mind. What happened? What's in there? Is there a note? Is there these things, right? And so when I'm on scene and I go in and I'm able to see it physically, I can then go out to the family. And if they have those questions, I can come at it from a peer approach and a very soft approach. So I'm not necessarily, I can explain things to them in a way that isn't as necessarily so big and so impactful. Right. I can lighten the load a little bit, tell the truth, but kind of ease that information to them. And a lot of times, in a different space that someone maybe doesn't necessarily take that approach, they will get very brass, very detailed information immediately, and that can be very overwhelming.
Like paperwork details where you might not necessarily need all that.
Right. Yeah. And again, I can always check the case and do that on a later time, so I guess it's not that big of a difference, but I do feel that immediate connection assists in that rapport building, and so as time goes on, I get more and more information, and so I kind of enjoy being there with them.
Let me ask you a couple of lighter questions before I hit you with something heavier. Is that fair?
That's fair.
What have you learned about yourself since you started this job?
Wow, that's a very good question. I feel like I've learned that I'm very resilient. I think that is something that I didn't necessarily think about. I don't know if us as humans, we think about resiliency too much in our own personal, but I feel like, I am very resilient. I see very heavy things on a daily basis, yet I go home to my wife and my 7-month-old son, and I don't feel affected. I feel like I'm making the world a better place for my son. And so I felt like that is something that I learned new about myself, but also I'm someone who has imposter syndrome. And so doing this and then being in spaces around people who've done this for a very long time, you can kind of feel overwhelmed, like, well, I don't belong here.
You think is that the youth factor? Is that
And
the
it
young
might be.
factor?
Yeah,
Is it
it might-
experience factor?
It might be the youth factor, and then with youth factor would come, lack of experience, because I'm meeting with people who've been in the mental health space for 30, 40 years.
Sure.
And then I've only been doing it for 6. Okay. But when I'm in those rooms, in those meetings with them, and I have this conversation about what I'm seeing on a daily basis and how I feel like this information that I'm obtaining can truly change the landscape of suicide prevention, I kind of leave those meetings and I say, I think I do belong.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I've learned too, is being kind of thrusted into something that didn't exist. You had no groundwork for it. I had to create it from the ground up. And I've done a lot of that, and I've kind of expanded this beyond what we even thought it would be when it comes
That's
to
great.
additional
I think,
stuff.
Well, I mean, what a magnificent opportunity to have been given to you to do something. One, in an area that you studied and loved, and then to get to learn more about it. And then obviously, I said in the outset of the podcast, when you ask the questions about the when and the how and the why, and does this information help to prevent down the line? What are we learning from these families and these cases? The information that we're gathering, the state of minds, the atmosphere of the home, whatever the case might be. I mean, there's so much data that has to be pouring in on each situation. Are you able, and is Ohio Suicide able to channel this data and get some good stuff out of it to further the cause?
Yeah, so that's kind of like I said, it was a 2-part, right? I talked a little bit about the forensics, but on the other end, when I'm connecting with the families, although their well-being is my number one priority, making sure that they're connected with grief guidance and resources, which I think to date I've connected with well over 700 individuals who've been impacted by suicide.
That since you started this job,
Correct.
That's 700.
Over 700.
That's a lot of souls.
Yeah.
A lot of souls.
And so that information that you're talking about, that why, that how, that
Yeah.
information, so that comes out through my psychosocial interview. So this is when I'm
A
interviewing.
psychosocial
interview.
Explain that.
Yeah, so it's typically I'm going to be interviewing next of kin, friends, coworkers, anyone who've been impacted by this suicide death that was reported to our office. In that, I'm going to be asking questions related to, physical health history, mental health history, education, occupation, suicidal ideation. So I talk a little bit more about what were some maybe behavior changes that you experience with your loved one a little bit prior to their death, or we talk a little bit about any times that they've expressed it in the past. We talk about substance use, as there's a very big correlation between mental health and substance use. And so in that questionnaire, I'm also talking about life stressors. What was going on in your loved one's life recently that you feel may have bogged them down or stressed them out to the point where suicide and harming themselves was the only option for them? And so that's when we kind of really dive into why we're here. And again, when I talked about a little bit earlier, that why question when it comes to suicide is something that will drive a suicide loss survivor crazy.
I bet.
Because there's a lot of times you don't know that.
You have no idea.
But again, that work that I'm doing and trying to pull that information, and a lot of times it's helping the family themselves answer that why question, because
That's part of your investigation,
correct.
in a sense.
Yeah, and so that's bringing situations, stressors, things that they might not even have thought of. An idea of that is a lot of times I'm speaking with families and they talk about, when I ask about behavior changes, they instantly go, well, no, there's no negative behavior changes. And I go, well, what about positive ones? And then they tell me that they actually seemed very euphoric. They were selling off their things. They were doing a spring cleaning. And I'm like, right. I was like, again, this could be them making sure that you're set up for their end of life. And so a lot of times just that connotation to society isn't necessarily known. They think they have to be wildly depressed and living a very stressful life.
They're staying in bed in the dark with with the covers over their head. Right.
We talk about this the stigmas, and we talk about the stereotypes. Sometimes you break. That's great. What about the positive? The positivity? No, I thought he was just. I took it as a great sign that he was. And he's finally. Taking some motivation and doing things, but that's amazing. There's a term, and someone asked me to explain it, but suicidal ideation is something that we're hearing more and more of, and it's something that probably a lot of us, even in this room, have probably done and aren't completely aware of it. Explain suicide ideation.
Yeah, so suicidal ideation needs to be its own separate thing, and a lot of times, a lot of people will pair that with mental health, and that's not necessarily always the case. And it's because you can actually be suicidal within 5 minutes and take your life and not have been suicidal prior to that. So it is its own mental kind of difficulty, and suicidal ideation is a very multifaceted thing. Like I said, it's not always mental health. It could be anything. It could be a loss of job. It could be more financial situations or loss of housing or a relationship problem, an argument with your loved one. Like, these are all things that could really change the chemical balance in your mind, and then make you contemplate end of life. And so a lot of times when we look at the mental health space, a lot of mental health professionals, they try to treat the mental health and treat that depression, that anxiety, that bipolar, that PTSD, but they don't necessarily have the equipment or understanding to affect the suicidal ideation specifically. And this is something that still needs studied. It is a very difficult thing to tap into. But
it's pretty broad. But when I said there could be anybody in this room, we've all gone through our fair share of hardships.
This would be a lot easier if I went around or whatever.
And I'm watching It's a Wonderful Life again this year, and I see George Bailey with the suicidal ideation. I'm worth more dead than alive. And contemplating it all.
So what triggers you, right?
And I've seen it lately in the news is the what's it called? Like the blackmail, the sexting blackmail thing that just came out to be a law this year, where
that's right. There's a kid
young adults are being blackmailed with nudes, with selfies, and
there's like AI too that they're putting out there too.
They get phished.
So. It could be something like that. Like, we're not even thinking about even a real instance that could.
You kind of hit on it with AI, and we've unfortunately seen that in Franklin County, where that itself, and we've had individuals who attempted to build relationships with AI, in which kind of turned on them and kind of provoked them in a sense to take their own life. So AI, the internet, social media is a very dangerous source for everyone, but more specifically our youth. And so a lot of times their suicidal ideation can be brought from that internet interaction, the social media, bullying, things like that our young people unfortunately experience. That it can come from that as well. And so suicidal ideation itself is a very difficult task. But again, a lot of the work that I do and all my partners and agencies that I work with, we talk about making sure that we're isolating that suicidal ideation and really taking a deep look into that itself to figure out what we can do. And a lot of times it's equipping loved ones with QPR, which is Question, Persuade, Refer, which is a training. There's free ones. You can really equip yourself in being more comfortable in navigating a conversation related to suicide. And so it actually equips you with the ability to go to your loved one who you might believes kind of exhibiting some red flags, and you can approach them, and it equips you with the proper questions to ask. And that training can then make you feel more comfortable to have that conversation, and then you can bring those feelings up with your loved one, and then the really important part is making sure that they are connected with services after that.
QPR is that what it's?
Yep. Question, persuade, and refer.
If you give us a link, we could put it in the show notes.
We could do that. We could put it in the show notes for sure.
Make sure
And I work with the Franklin County Suicide Prevention Coalition, and a lot of times we'll provide that free training, and so people can come and actually equip themselves with that, because a lot of it, you speak to someone who hasn't had that conversation before, they're like, I can't ask my loved one if they want to harm themselves. It's going to make them want to do it. Or
I always worry that with my kids. I'm like, I don't want to put that idea in their head, right?
If it wasn't in their head before, why am I putting
now
it
they're
in
going to
now?
think about it.
Right.
Because you care about you want them to be aware.
Yeah,
I get it.
And through the process, there's no evidence to suggest that you bringing that up and opening that avenue of conversation
That's a good
is going to
parental
lead to that.
because there's stuff I don't bring up because I'm like, I don't want them to know about this shit.
Again, like once you show them that you're someone that they can lean on and have that conversation with you, because if you think at their end and they are thinking about suicide and harming themselves, they're not going to just tell anyone that, right? That's a very scary thing. If I tell someone who isn't equipped or can handle that, they're going to think I'm crazy and they're going to send me to the psych ward, right? Yeah. But if they know that their loved ones can take that information, be there for them, open that avenue of assistance, they'll feel more comfortable in saying, you know what, I do have a problem. I have thought about it before. What can I do? Because I don't want to feel that way. And then that is when question, persuade, and refer comes in hand, because you actually do a lot of research and knowing what are the services in your local community and where you can connect your loved ones to. So you're not necessarily taking all of their issues and then putting it on your own shoulders, because then it only bogs you down further.
Right. What am I going to do about it?
Right. But so that's the refer part, is actually referring them to professional help and getting them connected with services that can help them along the way.
So you do this from 8 to 4, but you said earlier that, sometimes I wish I could do it 24/7. So let me shift gears for 1 second. You don't do it 24/7. You do it from 8 to 4. You mentioned your wife. You mentioned your lovely 7-month-old child, boy or girl?
Boy.
Boy? Yeah. Congratulations. What's his name?
Mm-hmm. It's Cohen.
Cohen.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
Great name.
good name.
So what?
Hold on, before you ask the question, can I say something about a 7-month-old?
What? Go ahead.
I want you. My advice for new dads is always wait till 9 months.
Wait till 9
I remember like my life was a shit show until 9 months. Okay. At 9 months, I feel like there's like this switch that flips, and then you're like, hey, I can actually handle this.
Yeah,
so you're a couple months, and you'll be out of the woods.
What if his first 7 months though have been perfect?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, then it's gonna get better. It's only gonna get better.
I can say outside of the hours between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., he's wonderful. But he has not figured out the sleeping situation yet.
Yeah.
So my wife is taking the brunt of that, and so she's up every hour to 2 hours. And yeah, she's absolutely wonderful and could not have do this without her. But outside of that, he's a perfect baby. Somehow he's still happy and jumping around, but he just doesn't sleep. His naps are 30 minutes, and he just doesn't sleep.
Oh, man.
So hopefully we figure that out some point.
Baby. So what do you do for fun? What do you do to be happy?
Yeah, for sure. So I am. That is a good question. I'm an avid music lover. So I love to go like rock, heavy metal or that kind of stuff. I'm a good fan of. Now, I will say I love music in general. My wife is a country music fan, so we go to country music concerts, and I just love the concert atmosphere in general. I love just the art of music. It's just that expression to me is really cool. Wish I could do it.
You don't play?
I used to play the drums back in the day.
No. You don't used to play the drums. You played the drums and you
Once a
stopped.
drummer,
You don't say
always
you.
a drummer.
You don't used to play the drums. You played them.
I did play the drums.
You just choose not to play them now.
Yeah.
So you can still pick up the sticks if you
That's why
want.
his
Probably.
kid's not sleeping.
Right? I could probably figure it out.
You can figure it out.
I could probably figure it out.
All
But
right.
so I did play some music there for a while. But just again, going to concerts. I play competitive softball, like slow pitch softball. I actually got up to a pretty high level and was traveling to different states the past couple years to play.
Cool.
So that's something that I do. I'm a bowler. I like to just be competitive.
What's your average?
About 205.
Damn,
That's pretty good.
that's real good.
We got league tomorrow, so I'm mentally preparing for that. So yeah, I mean, just
He's already not thinking about tomorrow.
I think about it all week, and then I go, and then I don't bowl well, and then I'm like, I hate this sport. Why do I play this?
That's the way I feel about any sport.
Anything you do.
Everything, yeah.
And then I wake up the next morning, I'm like, if I just would have tweaked my hand just a little bit, I would have had a different score, and then I would love the sport. So yeah, just anything competitive sports.
So you are competitive.
Very.
Yeah.
Very. I can be a little bit overly competitive at times. It's never at other people. It's always just I have an internal perfection.
You the let's go guy.
Let's go. It goes. It works in tandem.
Yeah.
Whether you realize it or not, with what you said earlier about like I have this imposter syndrome. So it's your own competitiveness. That's the reason you interviewed for a forensic job 4 times.
4 times.
No, it's part of it. It's the like I'm gonna get. You told me no. Yeah. No, it's a competitive nature. I'm gonna go back and go after it again.
And that's true. I mean, when I was in those interviews, I was betting on myself. I was honest. I said I don't have the immediate experience when it comes to death investigation, but I said if you give me an opportunity, I will work my butt off and show you that I can do this and I can pick it up very.
And
quickly.
I'd rather hire someone like that than somebody with all the experience in the world who's just a half-ass.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. I agree. But yeah, so I played baseball in college and stuff. So that
played baseball in college.
Yeah, so that kind of.
Were you on scholarship?
No, so I went to Division III, so they don't actually give scholarships, but we did grants and stuff like that.
Where at? Like
Muskingum University.
Muskingum.
Yeah, so it's out east between Zanesville and Cambridge. But best 4 years of my life. I knew I wasn't going pro by any means, but being able to play a sport at that high level.
But people do come from Division III.
There are people,
sure they do,
especially baseball.
And was it? And when you chose that particular course of study in college, was what you're doing, or well, you can't say that what you're doing now was always the goal because they created the position, but the world that you're in, was that always the goal?
Yeah, so that's the thing.
Or was there something else you wanted to be?
Yeah, so that is when you study criminal justice in college.
Yeah.
It's very broad. It's a very big umbrella, and we talk about the 3 C's, which is cops, courts, and corrections, right?
Right.
And so you really kind of experience a lot of the different jobs that you can do in those 3 C's. And so as I was doing internships and stuff, I internshiped at a prison, and just really was trying to find my niche in criminal justice. At that point, I really thought about, where I think my space is mental health. Again, personal, but also I just felt like I was always someone that people could come to and talk about their struggles, and I was confident in sharing my experience with people and kind of guiding them.
You have
through
empathy.
That. Right. And so I felt very quickly that my niche was that mental health, and that's when I found myself in the youth space, and then again, this is kind of all fell in my lap, but I found out pretty quickly that even with my criminal justice degree, mental health is where I wanted to be.
For something that's fallen into your lap, though, you've done a remarkable job with it so far. And I hate to I'm not harboring on the youth, but I find it amazing that at a young age you've accomplished what some people much older than you have not yet accomplished.
Well, I appreciate that.
And you're very welcome. And so I'm kind of like amazed at what the future holds for you. I mean, what you can do in the years to come.
Yeah.
Because I think up to the age you are, you're still a sponge. You're still absorbing a lot of things and learning and still able to effectively apply what you've learned to the current, as opposed to something I learned when I was, 30 years old. Yeah, it's still in there somewhat, but to be able to apply it immediately while I'm still doing what I'm doing, that's pretty amazing. Again, I'm going to go back to, you do it from 8 to 4, and you wish you were doing 24/7. But as I look at you, I see the hoodie, the Happiness Project.
Yeah.
I see the hat, down with my
Down with my demons.
Down with my demons. So
that's a good heavy metal band name.
yeah, man, it's you're working it even when you're off the clock, and what you wear and how you present yourself.
Yeah,
because that hat sends a message. That hoodie says something too.
And actually, on the back of it says that the world is better with you here. So, So
you're sending a message.
I've seen something like that before.
Yeah.
What is the Happiness Project?
So, Happiness Project is actually something that was created by student age individuals who had a student of someone who was in their school, a classmate of theirs who died by suicide. So they actually went out and created this project in which they were spreading messages of positivity and saying things like, "The world is better with you here."
It's such a simple line that
it
hits.
is.
Yeah.
My point being, though, even when you're off the clock, you're still kind of spreading the word. You want people to ask you what that hoodie's about.
Yeah, I do, and I think when a lot of people learn what I do,
right?
I'll get a text from them in a couple of days, and they'll say, "Hey, man, I just want to talk to you about something," and I'm like, I'm all ears. I'll have that conversation with you. And so, people would talk about their own personal struggles, or they'll talk about, hey, I have this friend, haven't really connected to them in a while, but they said something on Facebook that was just a little weird. It kind of made me feel like it might be suicidal in nature. What should I do? How can I reach out? And so they'll kind of ask me that way. So I guess you could say that I am also doing that off the clock, because I do want everyone, all my friends, I check in with them, make sure that they're doing okay, that they know that they can reach out to me, my family, anyone. And so, and strangers. I mean, I've had this hoodie on, and since it was actually a couple months ago, I was at Dave & Buster's. I was in the bathroom. Someone walked out and he said, "I love your sweatshirt, man."
Yeah.
And we had a conversation just as we were leaving the bathroom where he talked about, I've experienced something like that, man. I just appreciate you out here with that hoodie on and spreading that message. And so, it's.
Where'd you get the hat? I love the hat.
I actually got it at PacSun a while ago. So this is like my favorite hat, and I wear it a lot.
I know. It's a down with my demons.
PacSun, it's just like a. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
PacSun? Yeah, so it's like a
Pacific
place?
Sunwear.
Oh, it's a hat place.
It's a hat place.
Yeah,
I thought it was a
apparel.
convention for guys like that.
Oh no, it's just like
Remember the last time you were at a mall?
No.
yeah. So they do like surfwear, skateboard
Oh, okay.
wear,
I got you.
stuff like
I
that.
got
They used to have stores at the mall.
Sorry, stupid question.
No, that's not a stupid question. Not a stupid question at all.
And again, like,
Next to the pennies.
That's right.
that is something.
Just across from Spencer Gifts,
That's my
Now I know
favorite.
where it is.
and then you can go get a pretzel.
Anti-M's or
Are you down? Are you down with your demons? Are
I
you
am,
down?
and I think that's
What's
what I
this-
talked a little bit about earlier. Is
Yeah.
when I was able to understand my depression and my anxiety. That's kind of the analogy I think it's making. So everyone has different demons. It might not
Sure.
be mental illness. It could be.
It's certainly not whiskey.
There you go.
But we're socially sipping.
So the analogy
Yes.
for me was depression and anxiety. So meaning to be down with them means I kind of took a look at myself, met them, figured out who they
You gotta
are,
met the demons.
understood them, and then figured out how I can continue to live with them. Because it might not be something that goes away. It could be
No,
something that you live with forever.
It does. I say that all the time. It seems like speaking from personal experience, it seems like my demons sit and wait
Yeah.
for me to be vulnerable to get in there. So, I mean, dude, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody's 100%. In as far as they're being optimistic and pro positive about what they're doing. What do you do? Are you aware when
Yeah.
you're down, when you're vulnerable, when your shields are down, and the opportunity for that depression or that anxiety, like water, can just find a way in? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean that's the key right there. Knowing how it affects you personally, because how depression affects me could be completely different of how it affects you, and everyone in this room.
Right.
We could all navigate that differently. So understanding how it affects me personally, so that when those moments happen, I can say, okay, this is a depressive episode. Now I understand that, and now I can actually work to figure out what are my coping mechanisms, what is my coping skill to live in this moment right now, continue to be safe, but also to get through it and then continue on. So for me, a lot of times my depression will come in a sense of loneliness. No matter how much love I have around me,
Right.
I have a wife, a son,
crazy,
my family
right?
is
Right.
wonderful.
It's nuts.
I have friends. I have a really big support system, but for me, it'll literally try to put a
way.
curtain over that and say, no, you're lonely. You don't have anyone.
Right.
And so then I will kind of close off. I'll become really quiet. And so I know that. But I also know that me being closed off and quiet is not helping my wife. But so when I start to get in that moment where I'm starting to close off and become lonely, I've now figured out ways that I can pull myself out of that. And that could be music. That could be, hey, let's go out and throw a little bit, like throw the ball, or just kind of do something where it just changes what I'm doing in that moment. Go to the gym. Something that just changes the moment a little bit, and it's helped me kind of get out of that. So again, that's me being down with that, understanding that so that I can cope and continue to live with that, knowing that it's going to happen, but when it does, what can I do to get out of
I
it?
find out all the time, like stuff
Yeah.
that procrastination. I just found out is a symptom of depression.
Yeah.
Well, shit.
Hell yeah.
What explains it? No, it is. Like weird things that you don't think
I
of.
was just talking to texting back with a friend of mine today, and he's realizing for the first time that what he's going through might be depression, because he's given every other reason and an excuse to explain it away, and we were just talking back and forth, and I said, and I was just very honest with him about what I've been going through and so forth, and what I've gone through, and he said like he said that your text messages to me, because I texted him privately. It was and he goes, just came at the right time when I was just like grasping for reasons and answers. So it ended up being a very positive day for me. We always talk about, if you get one, you save one. I mean, that's a start, right?
For sure.
So when you say you're down with my demons, not only are you suppressing them, but you're saying like, I know who you are. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, I know what you're about, and I know how to handle you should you
Right.
decide to raise your ugly head and come fuck with me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we can continue to move forward.
Right.
And not let it affect me anymore. Now, if I didn't know that, and I'm just sitting and sulking and feeling lonely all the time and just letting that overtake me, that can lead to additional situations that we don't want to lead to. So making sure that when we start to experience these things, take a personal understanding that I need to do something for myself. Now, again, we want to be there for others too, but a lot of it is really understanding that from your own perspective, really looking into yourself and saying, what can I do to pull myself out of those moments so that it doesn't just continue to be a snowball rolling down a hill? What can I do to stop it immediately, bring myself out, and continue to lead a successful life? And so I think that's what's being down with them is.
I got a couple more questions for you before we wrap things up. One of the things that bonded us that night at the dinner is, we talked about investigative work, and I told you that my history with investigative work. I also asked you, and I think you're just being polite, but if it can happen, I said that, if I ever get the opportunity to shadow you for a couple of days, and or like they do with police departments, ride-alongs, whatever the case might be, if that opportunity exists, given the work that I'm doing now with mantherapy.org and spreading that word, I think it would be beneficial to me. So if that still exists as a possible thing to do, I'm in.
Yeah.
I want to do it. So check with the superiors. And
We're big on education.
Okay, well, that's the way we'll approach it. Yeah. I don't want them to say, I don't want who that chuckle
I got a comedian.
Come on, what's he trying to write bits? No, I don't try to bits.
No, have your people call his people.
See if it's possible. If it's not, I completely understand. But if it is, I would find it extremely beneficial, because I'm still a sponge in an absorbing state. The other thing I asked you about that night at dinner, and was, as you are doing this investigative work and this post-vention work, and I'm sure with the people that are also there from the forensic side of things, it has to come up that some of these things that are being dismissed or considered closed as suicide, have you come across situations that
I was hoping you were going to ask this question.
that this isn't suicide, somebody actually did harm to this person?
Yeah. So that is the number one key to our forensic approach, is we go into every scene like it's a homicide. So that's what we do. No matter what the officer reports to us, we're going in there with the idea that this could be a homicide. And so we need to make sure that we investigate that scene extremely thoroughly, and to determine what's going on. And now we've had it. I did not too long ago. I had one where it was reported that it could have been. We go, and within 10 minutes of our investigation, we determined that the injuries that were present could not have been self-inflicted. And so then we thought, okay, now we need to take a step back.
But it was reported as a suicide.
Right. Yep. And so that has happened many times. We call them, I call them ambivalent suicide. So this means, and a lot of times it could be reported as such, but in the space of not only homicide, it could be homicide, but it also could be between an accident and an intentional, right? And so that's where that psychosocial comes into a lot of a play, where we're determining, is there a lot of suicidal ideation here? Is there a pattern of suicidal behavior? And matching that with toxicology results, scene findings, and then the knowledge of our pathologists to kind of compile and make a confident certification of death. And so again, a certification of death is a medical opinion. Our pathologists make a medical opinion on what cause of death is. And so it's our job as investigators to make that as confident as possible. So we've collected all the evidence that we could have collected to make their decision on what happened here to be as confident as possible.
If you have to go in front of a judge, you would be confident in saying, this is what we think.
Yeah. And so there are times where we go and we immediately find that forensically, this appears to be strange, that foul play may be at play here.
Do you get to continue to investigate that, or does that hand it off to somebody else now? Like, okay, like the suicide that we were investigating is no longer a suicide. We've determined it's a homicide.
Yeah.
Do you get to participate in that investigation, or is it handed off now to homicide detectives, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so at that time, if we go first and then we determine that this is strange, we will then actually step out and we'll contact homicide detectives. They'll come out because for us, what we're here to do is determine cause and manner of death.
Right.
We're not necessarily looking at who did it, that kind of stuff. So that's when we want to make sure that we're partnering with a homicide detective who's actually there to collect evidence to figure out who did this, not necessarily what happened or how it happened.
Are you ever called into court?
I have not been.
Okay.
But it is a possibility.
Yeah, okay.
It could be to kind of report on our findings and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So given a little bit that I know of you from the time we met at dinner to this podcast tonight, when it does shift gears like that, when it turns from a suicide to a homicide, is there a part of you that wishes you were still, is there a part of you that still is in your head and in your heart wanting to continue to investigate to find the real answers? Are you? I know that there's protocol.
Yeah.
It goes this way, but as you pass along the protocol and do what you're supposed to do, is there a Dallas Allen that's sitting there at home going like, man, I think after gathering all this information and hearing everything, I have my thoughts, and more importantly, does anybody listen to those thoughts?
Yeah. For sure. That goes back to my desire and investigation from the start, right?
Right.
I always love to just take the pieces and put them
Put
together.
them together. This is, I think, what connected us at dinner that night.
And so, yeah, I mean, in that moment, as much as I like to give closure and help families when it comes to suicide, I would also love to have the opportunity to give closure to families and go pick that person up myself that did this and give that closure to the family. So yeah, I mean, when we have to give that up, I do have kind of that itch. And it's like, man, I could go find him. I could find him.
I'm saying, I mean, you could go find him. You got the information, and would they be open to any additional information you could shed on the case, or once it's passed on, you gotta compartmentalize and move on to the next thing and not do that.
Yeah, so in that moment, we would contact homicide detectives and say, hey, this is a little strange. They would come out and then we would give them our entire rundown. We're able to give them the information that we do have and why we think that this might be a little different, and talk about who we might think that is a suspect information because what I learned through my interview, things like that. But then after that, yeah, I mean, homicide would then take the lead on that.
Take the lead
so,
on this.
I would have to kind of
back off.
Do you ever talk to, if this happens, do you ever talk to the family, or like as soon as you realize this happens, do you like just cease conversation? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so our protocol is that we do have to seize that because anything from that point
on, you're asking, you're digging, asking,
you can be subpoenaed for that. So our protocol is to back out completely at that.
Well, the whole reason that conversation came up is because I told you I did private investigative work, and I was on a case a few years back where I had to, it was a find the money case. Somebody had committed suicide and was supposed to present the day of and the night before, kill himself. They wrote it off as a suicide. Police report wrote it off as suicide. As I continued to put pieces together, my gut was telling me, that's why I asked you that question at dinner. My gut was telling me like, man, given who this person was involved with and everything and given the method, which I won't get into, there was too many things, but nobody wanted to hear that because I wasn't hired to do that. I was hired to find the money. Yeah. And I said, no, because I said at that point, if you don't care about the fact that a human life was extinguished by other means than his own accord, go find your own fucking money.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of science that goes into this, and so there's a lot of things that we can look for that would suggest it doesn't make sense. And so that could be, you think about livor mortis, which is the settling of the blood in the body. So it's gravity. So once your heart stops pumping the blood, the blood is going to fall towards gravity. Sure. So if someone dies laying on their back, the lividity is going to go to their back. But if someone is laying on their back now or somewhere else in a stage situation, but they're on their back yet all livor mortis is to the front, it doesn't make sense. And so
science.
Science! Yeah, so stuff like that and rigor mortis. And then also, trauma to the body. We can indicate, range of something or something like that. So we can indicate that it just doesn't necessarily make sense with what was reported to us. The science is suggesting something differently. And then that's when our doctors will get involved. They'll do an autopsy or an exam, and then they will determine, hey, we might need to take a different look into this, an additional look. Sure. We then contact homicide at that point, then it goes on to that.
What's the job called
Postvention. Postvention.
And is that's specifically the position they created for you, a postvention?
Yeah, suicide investigations and
postvention specialist. So he goes in after the fact.
Yeah. And you said there's someone who does it with ODs. Mm-hmm. Is it just in Ohio, or is there other throughout the country?
That when I started this, because it was new, and then as I did it, I was like, this information is gold.
Sure.
When it comes to suicide prevention and the data
podcast,
the data that the coroners or medical examiners' offices sit on, all the data that you were talking about was flooding in. Not only what we find on scene, but also all of that interview information that we have, using that to then create prevention off of it through suicide fatality reviews, using the local coalition to then provide them with the recommendations and, hey, we need to reach out to this agency and prove how they do this because we feel that it could prevent similar situations.
There's still some analytics after the fact.
Yeah, so that information is just extremely important and vital. And so I always had the idea of expanding that. And so I can say now we have successfully expanded that to Stark County. There is someone who now holds my same title, but in Stark County. She's actually coming down to our office next week and doing some shadowing with me, and I'm kind of going to help her through the process.
I guess she can go first since she's got the gig.
Yeah, and then I'll
wait my turn.
Yeah, and then I also present and travel. So I've traveled to about 15 different states. And given a presentation on what I do. And the hope is helping additional agencies to expand their own capacity, help them find grant funding to do this similar thing.
Cool. That's great.
We have
That's
one.
Exciting, man. That's cool.
Yeah, it is good. I mean, your future's bright, but I think what you're doing also makes the future bright for what we're trying to do in respects to suicide. I believe that the numbers went up in 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the goal is to get them down.
Yeah.
On all the levels.
Yeah.
Be it whatever the reasons be, we're trying just to get them down. I'm specifically working with men with man therapy to break the stigma and to get people to the help that they need.
Yeah.
So I think you and I are probably going to continue to stay in touch.
I hope so.
And converse. Yeah. And I think our worlds may have a chance of overlapping in a good way.
Yeah, for sure.
In a good way.
Yeah, I
I would sincerely appreciate you taking the time to come out, especially with a wife and a 7-month at home. Or then maybe we're doing you a favor. I don't know. I don't know.
We should go on for a couple more hours.
Give me a little break. Really? It's over? I got to go home?
What was the dinner you guys met at? And more importantly, what'd you have for dinner?
Yeah, right. There was we had a choice between salmon and steak. I think they gave us both. It was salmon and steak.
It was really good.
It was very thick.
Surf and turf.
Yeah. Very thick salmon. And we also bonded on the fact that it's almost, I don't want to say because it sounds very self-indulgent, but it's like looking at a younger me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because when we were sitting at the table, and again, I won't go into detail, but both of our spidey senses picked up on something at the table, as you recall. Don't need to go into detail.
Yeah.
But we both picked up on the same thing about the same individual. And that's when I said, I got to get him on the podcast and want to talk to him more.
Yeah.
But man,
it was could have been you, 30 years or whatever.
Well, if there would have been, if there would have been a position like that, I would have jumped on it at the time. So I'm glad I'm glad you are, and I'm glad you did, man. And
It's cool that there are government resources that are going to good things.
right.
You know,
Right.
it's kind of good. Glad
And
to
it's
know
not
that-
always
that-
an easy task. And
Right,
so a lot
right,
of that
right,
is
man.
the education part where I talk about what is being done so they can actually see how it is important. So like all that information that I'm talking about that I collect goes through the fatality review. And then we as a team, I have a multidisciplinary team of professionals in the community. We create recommendations off that information. So we're like, okay, what stood out? What was the problem? And what can we do as a community to better, and highlight the shortcomings within our community, make changes, and then prevent someone who has a similar situation from dying by suicide in the same manner. And so that just isn't happening everywhere. And so that's when we continue to educate. My hope is that this will continue to pop up because what's happening in Franklin County is happening everywhere else.
Exactly.
And if we can continue to bring that information to light, we can make a nationwide impact on suicide. Man.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I will say as we close, and since I am old enough to be your father, and then some, I will say, be aware of your weight. Be aware of the everyday. Be aware of where you're at and what you're doing. You know that. I mean, it's nothing. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I don't think it's a message that can be pounded in hard enough because you're doing good things, and I hope you continue to do those good things. But in order to do those good things, you got to be good.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
Can't pour into other glasses from an empty glass, they say, huh?
No, you cannot. Okay, that's even wiser.
Oh, that's
and
deep.
you know what? I know when to sign off, man.
Mic
That's
drop.
the button, I know when to mic drop. There it was, right there. Dallas Allen, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. God bless you, man, and God bless all the good work that you're doing. Hopefully, it continues to with the information gathered to save lives. As opposed to coming in on the other side of it. Yeah. Thank you to Greg Hansberry on the audio side, John Whitney on the video side, on all sides, Chip Cassell, and yes, folks, I know it was a rather somber, but I think hopefully a very positive start to the year to know that a guy like this is out there helping people like us and our families. So until the next bottle, my name is Dino Tripodis. See ya.